This course, Universe of the Arts B, covers almost 500 years. We start in the 1300s in southern Italy and the Renaissance, and we move through the Northern Renaissance, colonialism and the consequences of global trade, the Baroque period, scientific revolution. We get into quite a lot of detail with the Enlightenment and the birth of human rights and democracy. And finally, we close with Romanticism. So we cover a lot of ground, but there are consistently themes and questions that are worthwhile asking of each period as we go through. We can draw on these themes to practice critical thinking, but also to make sense of why we even study the Renaissance or the Enlightenment, and to make it easier to see that their questions are still the questions we're asking today. We'll use these themes to ask, to explore, to compare and contrast, to analyze, and apply the material we encounter. Theme 1, Human Freedom. The concept and role of human freedom is as important in the Renaissance in the 1400s as it is to Romanticism in the 1800s. But it completely transforms, quite dramatically, in that 400 years. We go from the Renaissance's rejection of the medieval world's rigid hierarchies to a complete social upheaval brought about by demands for individual freedoms and democratic rights in the American Revolutions and the Revolution of France in the late 1700s. Not only is freedom as a concept invented in this time, but so is the concept of the individual. We will question the necessity of this dramatic evolution of what's meant by freedom in the coming weeks. Theme number 2, Social Ties That Bind. The question of how do we organize ourselves to live with the maximum of individual freedom, yet live together peacefully and harmoniously, comes up over and over in the approximately 500 years this course covers. Thinkers from the Renaissance to the Age of Revolutions proposed answers to this question that range from everything from imaginary perfect utopias to violent dictatorships to people's revolutions, and even the first free love commune among the American transcendentalists in the 1800s. I'm going to ask you to think about the strengths and weaknesses of these proposals for yourself. Theme 3, Art as an Expression of Culture. This question or this theme might seem kind of obvious, but we're going to delve a bit deeper into the details. So we're going to look at how is it that we as human beings make meaning of the suffering in human life, the beauty of being alive. How do we make meaning of that through writing, art, architecture, theater, music? How do cultural works reflect and express the attitudes and preoccupations of the time from which they emerge? We're going to try and put things into context and compare them to other artworks of other contexts to try and reveal more about what really is the relationship between a cultural work and its time. We're going to also ask about the role of art and artists or writers and how it evolves over time because it shifts significantly from the Renaissance to the Romantic period. We'll look at what the limits of art are and the limits of what it can do in our lives. So we're going to look at these questions and throw them up against each of the artistic movements we encounter, less with an interest in doing very detailed analysis of each artwork, but looking at them as representative of their own context. Theme 4, Cultural Difference. How do we, as humans, respond to the cultural meaning of cultures different from our own? What can we learn from the misunderstandings, the inequalities, or just even the outrages of the past that the course will deal with? How has this shaped our world and our culture? The kinds of misreadings and misappropriations and assumptions that one culture or one group makes about another. And what ways do cultural works represent the civilization behind them? And to what extent can this be understood by those who are outside that culture that produced them? So this is an important thing to be asking about as we learn more and more about colonialism and how Western Europeans interact with countries and cultures around the world. And this persists as a set of questions, as most of them have not been resolved. Finally, with Theme 5, we'll ask how technological innovations transform cultural expression and experience. Technologies such as the printing press, the rifle, navigational devices like the astrolabe, the invention of three-point perspective, the cotton ginny, even oil paints, have had as much impact on culture as any single writer or artist during this time the course covers. So I'll be asking you to look at these impacts and compare and contrast them in the context of the time. So that is the 5 themes that I'm going to pursue as I prepare my lectures for this course, and it's also an indication of the kinds of things I'll ask you to talk about in assignments, tests, and also it lays a kind of groundwork for the kinds of questions you may be considering to build research questions for your own research projects as you go through the course.